So for those of you already checked out on the Skylane, this presentation is going to be pretty repetitive, but it may still serve as a decent refresher. And if you're not checked out on the Skylane, this is your intro to the G3X. As you know, the installation has been done in two phases, and this second phase is the bigger of the two, since we've now done away with the six-pack and the vacuum system. If you're new to glass panels, it'll give you an idea of some of the industry standard features and functions, and of course all the manuals you'll need are on the website, and the checklists will be updated also. The club GPU is available, so you don't have to burn tack time familiarizing yourself. Okay, so here's the new panel. It looks almost identical to our Skylane, and as you know, we've kept our GNS 430 as the number 2 radio and backup GPS. And the G5, our standby PFD, is in a slightly better center location. The six-pack and vacuum system are gone, and now we've also got a new GTX 345 transponder, identical to the Skylane and the Dakota. We also have newly installed USB power ports and our carbon monoxide monitor and ELT. It's a clean, modern glass panel. In broad terms, I guess we could say this has become the blue sky standard, which will someday be in our Dakota too. So since you're already familiar with the radio stack and the G5, let's talk about some of the new features with the G3X Touch. As the name implies, it's mostly operated through the touch screen, which works in an ingenious way. The system uses infrared beams that cross each other in vertical and horizontal patterns. And a disruption to that field, like your finger, defines the exact location on the screen. A benefit of this system is that it can detect essentially any opaque object, including a finger, gloved finger, or a stylus. The GTN 650 is also touchscreen, but it's the more traditional capacitive system, like your smartphone or a tablet. And the G5 is not touchscreen, and of course the GNS 430 isn't either. First, a quick look at the control knobs on the bottom of the unit, two concentric knobs on either side. We're used to those. They can have different functions, but you don't need to remember what those functions are. The unit tells you with a little legend right above the knob. Here's that legend. I've magnified it just so it's easier to read. But the important thing to know is that this legend changes depending on the page that you're on. So back to the outside bezel, we've got the knobs, and then we have 4 buttons too. The first one on the left is nearest airports. The G3X actually has its own GPS buried in there somewhere, but it's VFR only. Our GTN 650 and of course the GNS 430 are both WAS and fully capable IFR machines. Because of that, we'll always be using the GTN for any navigational functions. And that brings me to what I want to say about this next button. The Direct To button will only be used if both the GTN 650 and the GNS 430 have failed. And if you need nearest information, get it from the GTN. This nearest button will work similarly to the GTN, but if you needed or wanted to use it for any sort of navigation, like to actually go there, it won't work. So my suggestion is just get in the habit of using the GTN. The reason that these won't work for navigating is obvious. There can only be one navigation source at a time, and the GTN is our default navigator. If you remember nothing else, remember that the G3X is not your navigator. The GTN 650 is, with the 430 as its backup. The menu and back buttons are for navigating through the menus, and they definitely will be used, but honestly not a great deal. I've got one slide coming up now that gives a sort of schematic on the innards of the unit and what drives it. This is a very elementary explanation of what makes this thing work. Remember, our vacuum system and spinning gyros are gone. We all understood them and knew how they work, so it's important to at least have an elementary understanding of this too. Remember your private pilot check ride, you were responsible for being able to describe the function of the gyros. Now those spinning gyros are gone. This information may help in understanding what might happen if a component were to fail. So starting at the top, we have a new instrument called the magnetometer. It measures the magnetic field and using its own internal database applies the local variation to derive magnetic courses and headings. Our OAT and pedostatic information is now digitized and feeds the AHARS and air data computer. Those two components form the ADAHARS. These acronyms and systems are not just Garmin speak, it's industry speak. The AHARS, Attitude Heading Reference System, is an ingenious device with very precise inertial sensors. Same concept as what's inside an iPad, but more precise and more robust. What we've always seen with our mechanical gyros is now all solid-state digital. No more caging the gyro, no more resetting the DG, no more tapping the glass to free a sticking needle. The ADAHARS collects all this data and feeds it to the G3X display. New engine sensors send their digits to the engine instrument system, which is displayed on the left part of the G3X screen, giving us a more accurate display with better fuel functions and leaning assistance. And finally, back up to the top left, GPS data from the navigator assists the G3X. So let's take a look at the actual features and functions now of the G3X. This is what really matters to you and where this thing shines. So this is your PFD in full screen mode. The airspeed indicator, attitude indicator, altimeter, VSI, turn and bank all look quite similar to the G5. And the heading indicator rounds out your six-pack, but here it's displayed much clearer as an HSI. We have the additional ability to display insets. Here you can see two insets in the lower left and lower right of the screen. And there are several display options that you can choose from. You have map, traffic, flight plan, etc. Personally, I like to leave one in traffic, but that's easily changeable. And the way you make these changes is simply touch the HSI and it takes you to the PFD options page. Here you can see where you'd select the inset windows that you want. And if you touch those little green down arrows, you get the options. You can also see just below that you can change the bearing pointers, which we'll see in just a second. And below that there's a timer, but also there's a spot to select minimums for an instrument approach. Here are the bearing pointers. Now, sorry for the graphics on this, but I want it to be large enough so that you can see these needles. They're not the easiest things to see, and it does take some practice. They behave like an ADF bearing pointer, but they're selectable as to the source you want. Here is the single needle, the head, the tail, and the source. It's pointing at VOR1, and in this case, VOR1 is receiving Solberg. It's important to get in the practice of looking at both the head and the tail of the needle, and of course knowing what the source is. The double needle is pointing at McGuire, GXU, the active waypoint. To verify a crossing radial off of Solberg, you'd want to look at the tail of the single needle. Again, it takes a little practice and familiarization, but it works great. And a couple slides back, we saw where you can insert the minimums on an instrument approach. It will enunciate minimums when you get to that altitude, and it turns amber too. The MFD functions are laid out in chapters that are selectable either by touching the legend or by using the outer concentric knob on the lower right side. Blue Sky subscribes and maintains all en route charts, both VFR and IFR. In this case, the MFD is showing the charts screen with a sectional displayed. Here's the same charts chapter with an en route IFR chart. We also have all the approach plates in our subscription. And this is what it would look like with the plate displayed. You can also zoom in and pan around to look at the various components. Our Cessna Annunciator panel is gone, and in its place we have CAS Messages, the crew alerting system. There are a number of warnings programmed, and here you can see an example. One of the selectable pages on the MFD menu is the EIS, Engine Instrument System. It's actually labeled ENG, which you can see in the very lower right corner of the screen. This page is very easy to access because you can simply touch the engine instruments on the far left of the screen to access it. So obviously you want this page up for engine start, since the first thing you do after engine start is to check the engine parameters. I recommend having it up for takeoff also. The electrical panel is here, so you can verify that your alternator is charging and your battery status right away. And since our 172 is injected, obviously we won't have the carb temp panel, and of course we only have 4 cylinders. We've also got checklists, both normal and emergency, which you can check off as you go. Synthetic vision is displayed by default. It's a sort of overlay that uses the terrain and obstacle database to create a forward-looking view of the terrain, including lakes and obstacles. But the really nice thing about it is that it provides all these other features. Here's the zero pitch line, which is not necessarily your flight path. This is the horizon. You can see here on the distance on the left side that the zero pitch actually takes you into the mountain. The flight path marker shows your trajectory where your present path will take you. Pathways is a Garmin feature that will show you a path to get to where you've told the flight director that you want to go. We've left this turned off to begin with, but you'll have the ability to use it if you want. Synthetic vision also displays airport signs that will pop up when you're close by, and it shows traffic with a color coding based on threat. Runways, and there's also a sort of a ground proximity warning system that will alert you to terrain and obstacles with a flag that works in conjunction with an oral alert. For example, caution, terrain. You may have seen this already on one of the other slides, but we've got wind display and true airspeed displayed also. Safe Taxi is a Garmin feature visible on either a map page or a waypoint page on the MFD in split screen. For anybody who has ever been confused taxiing at an unfamiliar airport, this will be a big help. Everything is labeled: taxiways, runways, ramps, tower, even the hotspots have an explanation. So you can see the big red circle contains the label complex intersection. Nice stuff. Reaching cruise altitude, you want to lean the engine. We've got new instrumentation that should allow us to lean very accurately. We haven't been able to use this on the Skylane because it's carbureted and the fuel distribution is kind of messy. But now with our fuel injected Lycoming, we should be able to. Here's a synthetic vision view of the runway. This is landing on runway 3 at Sussex. And yes, those hills are accurate. So as you've seen, there's a lot of information displayed here. Some of this stuff you won't even see for your first few flights. Then, once you know where it is, you'll start to incorporate it into your scan. It'll take some habit forming to get yourself looking in the right place. I mentioned before that all the manuals are online. Go to the Skyhawk page and scroll down and click on the button. It says click for aircraft docs. The 650 iPad simulator is a great tool, but unfortunately, as of today anyway, there's no iPad G3X simulator. The club's GPU is an awesome tool to familiarize yourself with this. Zero takt time, zero noise, zero turbulence. It makes for a great learning environment. Move the plane down to the big hangar and you'll find an outlet in there that we can use. Obviously, you should still block the plane in Schedule Master, and the master switch should remain off. Just plug it in, turn it on, and the G3X will light up. You can then turn on the Avionics master too. And as always, we ask you on all of our equipment to please not change any data fields. It just makes it confusing for the next pilot. If there are data fields that you think legitimately should be changed for everyone, let us know and we'll evaluate the requests. If anybody has any questions or comments or just wants to talk about this stuff, the Club CFIs are fully familiar with all of these new avionics. All you got to do is reach out to one of us.